Hello YouTubers and welcome to Novus Talks with me, your host Novus Scorvius. And finally, I have seen and I get to do a review for Spiral from the Book of Saw. I've been talking about this movie since 2019, back when we just knew as Saw 9. And I've been following the news right up until the release, but unfortunately because of cinemas being closed in this country for a while until literally just 2 days ago, I haven't been able to see it, and most people saw it last month, or 2 weeks ago rather, and other people just waited till it came out in streaming. I wanted to wait till the big screen experience because I don't like streaming at all. I think cinema is the only way to watch films, truly. I think it is the definitive movie-going experience. But that's not the point of this video. I waited to see the movie, and just like Godzilla vs. Kong, I'm happier that I saw it on the big screen. But anyways, everyone has seen the movie now, so I guess I don't really need to worry about spoilers all that much. But that being said, I won't include any spoilers in this. There will be no spoilers. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. This movie obviously was pitched by Chris Rock. He came up with the idea, and then him along with Josh Stolberg and Pete Goldfinger, who wrote the script for Jigsaw, created the script for this. And Darren Bousman, who did Saw 2, Saw 3 and Saw 4, came back to direct. And I gotta say, Darren Bousman was saying coming up to the release of the movie that this would be a very different movie. He was saying in his own words, this isn't Saw 9, it's Spiral, it's its own thing or whatever. It's a spin-off basically is what we were all knowing it is, and that is true. This movie is definitely 100% a spin-off. It is definitely not a sequel to any of the previous movies. It's very much its own separate thing, set after Jigsaw, I presume. And it's its own, I want to say, self-contained story. It's very hard for me to actually form an opinion on this movie. I saw it like 5 hours ago, and it's still very hard for me to come up with a definitive view on this movie because I'm left kind of conflicted. On one hand, this movie had some really good writing. I think the character moments between Detective Zeke Banks, played by Chris Rock, and William Shank, played by, I don't know who the actor is, they had some great character moments back and forth, and I liked that. It felt like a personal story for Zeke. They tried that with Saw 4, and it didn't work out that well with Lieutenant Riggs. But this time with this movie, Spiral, I think it did work quite well. And I also think the writing in terms of the killer's motives and stuff are a lot better than what they've usually been before. With before, it's very much been kind of just people wanting to either follow on from John simply because he told them to, or because they felt he owed them, which was the case for Logan. But with this killer, it's very much a personal thing, and there's a reason why they're specifically targeting cops and no one else, and the movie goes into that as it goes on, and especially toward the final sequence. That being said though, even though this movie is good, at the same time it's weirdly forgettable. I'm really conflicted because the moment the credits rolled up, I pretty much completely forgot everything about the movie already. It's very strange, and I think I know the reason why. I think because it's its own self-contained reason, because the movie focuses so much on the cops, and so each of the traps have different victims, but they're all there for the exact same reason, for simply being cops. And I think because of that, nothing really stands out. I think it makes everything just sort of blend together, and so even though the traps, which I will get into in a minute, do stand out, at the same time they also fade into obscurity because there's no defining trait relating to the person that makes them stand out. Comparing to the previous ones, my favorite trap previously in Saw 4 was I don't know the name of it, but the voyeur guy in the bedroom has to gouge his eyes out to release the restraints on his limbs because he was using his body to abuse women. And that was my favorite trap for a long while because I liked how it related specifically to what that man had done, his actions, and those kind of traps in Saw is what I'm trying to refer to here, is how in previous movies you had traps that directly related to the actions of a person. Here, there's nothing that makes them unique. The traps themselves are unique, but they all sort of blend together because there's nothing to differentiate one person from another. And another weird thing is that even though this is standalone, it is also really convoluted and confusing at the same time. I'm not really sure how to describe it without spoiling it or anything, but there is some backstory that had happened a few years before in the context of the film's story that directly relates to everything that's going on in the film, but it's so convoluted about where each character was at the time and which character did what and who was involved in the scenario. And it's, by the end of the film, even though this played into the finale, I was very sort of confused and I didn't understand that at all. The movie just kind of expected you to roll with it, I think. And another thing, one of my big gripes about this, even though I expected this, was that it's a spin-off, it's a standalone. Darren was not lying. This is very much its own thing because there is nothing connecting this to the previous Saw movies. Tobin Bell is not in this at all. Not even mentioned. Well, Jigsaw is mentioned once or twice at the very beginning, and that's it. He does not factor into this at all, which was a big surprise. I thought he would have a big hand in the finale, but no. And on top of that, we thought from the trailers that we were revisiting old locations and old traps, but no, none of that was the case. The previous movies had no influence on this. It's easier to compare Spiral to Jigsaw than it is to any of the other movies, because Jigsaw was kind of guilty of the same thing. It was its own separate thing that didn't really follow on from the previous movies. The key difference being that Jigsaw actually had Jigsaw. It actually felt like a Saw film and it wasn't trying to be something different. Spiral is a bit strange because it wants to be a Saw film, but it's doing something completely different, so it really should have been its own completely different IP and a franchise that isn't Saw, because otherwise it feels so strange when you're trying to compare it to what has come before. Sometimes I feel like this movie plays out like an episode of CSI. Don't get me wrong, I am really glad that they brought back the more thriller focus on it. Something that Saw 1 and to an extent Saw 2, 3 and 4 kind of did, and even 5, where it's like the police side of things. I liked that more thriller investigation side of it. Spiral obviously leans heavily into it because police are the key focal point of this movie, but it does feel like an episode of CSI with some moments of extreme violence in between, and I'm not really sure how to feel about that. Because of that is why it doesn't feel like a Saw film. But I will use this to get into this segment here about the traps. As I said, the traps, they're really creative and really unique. They don't rely on similar concepts that I've done already. Like, for example, how in Saw 7 we got the brazen oven trap, which we had someone getting burnt to death. We had someone previously get burnt to death in Saw 2, and I believe in Saw 6 as well. So like there's no sort of repeating of the same way of dying. Every way someone dies in this movie is unique and hasn't been done before. And so it makes the traps feel completely fresh and brand new and creative. They're extremely violent. They are definitely the most... This movie is without a doubt the most gruesome of all 9 of them. It is exceptionally gory, and there's one trap in particular I won't spoil, but people will know what it is. That, like, if this was the previous Saw movies, the dismemberment would have been quick and there'd be some flash of blood, but that would be it. But because it's this movie, it's slow, it's drawn out. You get to see the flesh like coming apart and like the muscles ripping and the bones coming out, and Jesus Christ, like they really try to make you get a very close-up look at what it's really like to see someone get like pulled apart. Like it's very gruesome. It's exceptionally violent. It's unbelievably extreme, and I do like that. I like that they found a way to balance the violence with the story and everything else, because that's the problem people had with Saw 4 onwards, was that they relied too much on traps that were unwinnable and just flat out violent, and that the films lacked sustenance because of that. Spiral has that unbelievable amounts of violence, but it has substance to its story at the same time. And it shocks me because with Jigsaw, like the traps in Jigsaw were bloody, but like they were tame. The blood wasn't extreme. Like when I think of the blender trap, for example, with the motorcycle, he gets torn to ribbons and there's blood everywhere, but it's not extreme in your face. Whereas like in this film, when there's blood, they go out of their way to make it realistic and make sure that there's fucking gallons of it. And yeah, it is unrelenting, unforgiving carnage. There's only a few traps. There's not as many as in previous movies, but they make up for it in just carnage. That's the only way I can describe it, because it's absolutely violent, and I love that. There's one trap in particular. It is now my favorite trap in the entire franchise, even though I just said it's forgettable and it's obscure because of the weird, like, forgettable nature of the story. So I know, like, to you right now, it probably isn't coming across clear whether I liked this movie or not. And that's because I don't really know myself. You know, I wanted, when I saw the trailers, for it to be something that connects with the previous movies, you know. The Book of Saw subtitle, I was thinking a literal book or like a religious cult thing that was established in Jigsaw, but it completely ignored that, and that Book of Saw subtitle becomes irrelevant. And so from that point of view, I was disappointed, but at the same time, going into it, I kind of knew not to expect that, and I didn't expect that, because Darren was very clear, as were many other people involved, that this was a spin-off, it was its own thing. And plus, I'd seen some of the reviews and stuff as well. One more thing I do want to bring up, and I almost completely forgot, was the twist in this movie, because these movies always have a twist, is made too obvious. You'll know who the killer is 10 minutes into the movie. I'm not exaggerating. The camera work focuses too much on one character to the point where it becomes immediately suspicious and you begin to have doubts. And the movie does something a good bit into the movie that makes you begin to question this character. And yeah, you'll have figured out that that character is the killer by the end of it. And in general, like, I didn't like the ending outside of that anyway, because it's hard to explain without spoiling it, but the style of this ending compared to the previous 8 movies is completely different. The previous 8 movies relied on presenting you the killer in like the last 30 seconds of the film, whereas this one does something slightly different. That I get why they did it, to make it new and different, but I don't like it, because the ending sequence, I get why they did it. It's to drive home a point relating to the story and the plot and the overall theme of the movie, but it just doesn't work like the classic endings, you know. If you're not having it done in that style, it doesn't really have the same impact, to me anyway. But yeah, in overall, I think Jigsaw is better than this. I do. I know I said here's the thing, Jigsaw is a good movie. It's just a weak Saw movie, I feel. Which is why I put it like second lowest on my list. Saw 4 is the lowest because I think that movie was actually bad, but Jigsaw was just weak in terms of its structure and characters and things like that. Spiral, it's much harder because there is good writing here. It is well written, but at the same time it just feels convoluted. I am going to see this movie a second time pretty soon, and I'm probably going to see it like a third and a fourth time and maybe even a fifth time, so Maybe I should have waited to see the movie a second time to do this review. My opinion might completely change, but just comparing it to how I enjoyed the others, I think Spiral goes below Jigsaw. They're both good movies, but both of them are weak in comparison to the other ones. And Spiral is weak because it has absolutely no connection to Saw. It very well should be its own thing. And we know that Saw 10 is coming because we saw the whole announcement thing or whatever. People are expecting a Spiral 2. I'm not expecting it to be Spiral 2 because here's the thing, Saw 7 and Jigsaw. Jigsaw never followed up from the ending of Saw 7. Technically Saw 7 didn't end on a cliffhanger, but having Gordon come out of nowhere, Jigsaw didn't follow up from that, and Spiral didn't follow up from Jigsaw. There was no Logan, there was no Dr. Gordon or anything like that. So I'm expecting Saw 10 to ignore Spiral's ending. I'll be shocked if there's actual continuity. I'd welcome continuity going forward, but I think it's gone. And so I'm left at this dilemma between wanting more Saw movies and also wanting them to end because the key point of Saw is gone. What made the first 7 so great and so watchable was, other than the violence, the continuity, how intertwined they were. It was like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. Each film needed the other in order to fully exist, and it was so beautifully crafted together. Jigsaw and Spiral lack that. There's no connection, and maybe Saw 10 follows on from Spiral or Jigsaw or fucking whatever they do, but I'm not placing bets on it. I'm one of the few I've learned my lesson now. I think the next movie will probably be its own thing, but we'll talk about that obviously when more details come out. And they are doing a TV series supposedly, and supposedly it's centered around Spiral. I don't know if they're going to keep the Spiral name going forward. Are they going to rebrand the franchise into Spiral instead of Saw? That'll be interesting to see, but I don't know. Obviously there's room to do. Is there room for a Spiral sequel? Yeah. Just like there's a room for a Saw 7 sequel and a Jigsaw sequel. Doesn't mean we'll get it, but we'll see when the time comes. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed Spiral from the Book of Saw. Was it worth the wait? Yeah, in the same way that Jigsaw was, but it doesn't compare to the first 7 films. It's an enjoyable film, but I think I would need to watch it a second time to have a proper opinion on it, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video to this. I'm not disappointed, but at the same time I'm not blown away, so I'm really in flux about it. So the only thing that's solid is that this is one of the weaker ones, so take that take that as you will. I've given you contradictory points in this video about the movie being good and being weak. You'd have to see it to really get what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, those are just my thoughts and opinions. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Have you seen Spiral from the Book of Saw? What did you think of it? Have you seen the previous 8 movies? How do you think Spiral compares? What do you think of the traps, the endings? Where do you think a sequel will go? I want to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section below. And yeah, with that all said, thank you all for watching and please subscribe. Novus Corvus out.